do to reforming the energy vision. In fact, I actually literally had to take the Google alert for REV off of my email because it was sort of blowing up my emails. I'm sure you all know. So everybody's watching. The Department of Energy is also very interested in seeing what New York can do, and it will probably lead the way for the country, and maybe examples around the world. So let's first start with I think it was who wanted to go first? Rudy, you wanted to go first. What are the solar issues that you would like to bring to the forefront as it relates to the utility of the future and what you envision for your company?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel as well today at this terrific summit. I think when we think about the future, you know, everything is changing from how we make, how we move, and then how we even use energy. And our grid, whether it's distribution or transmission, has to change as well, and we never want to lose sight of that. These are networks that have served us well in our respective companies for 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 years, but they're not going to be ready for the next 70, 80, 90, 100 years if we don't reinvest in them now to prepare them for that distributed energy resource future. So that's critical. So that is a challenge, but we also see it as an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity to really rethink how we regulate the industry, rethink how we as energy companies work with and embrace technology partners. And, you know, speaking for my own company, hands up, we don't think we do that well enough. That's something we think we're going to have to do much better as we move forward. And we also have to make sure we're building that resilient backbone that's there, that's resilient, but also integrates in renewables. So if I think about the things we would put forward, number one, first and foremost, it's we need to continue to invest in our infrastructure to prepare it for the future, prepare it for distributed resources, managing new resources coming on and off the grid. That's going to be critical. We can't ever overlook that, and it's going to get more complicated before it gets any easier. The second big point I mentioned was regulatory reform. We've got to look at how do we regulate utilities to focus in on not just running the day-to-day operation, but playing a role in executing public policy goals. Because we see our network and our role is to link customer needs with public policy goals. We don't want our networks to be an inhibitor when it comes to that. It has to be an enabler and enable these things. So regulatory reform and REV goes down that path considerably as well. And then the last two things I'd bring up is a very, very sharp focus on the customer. We can't sort of build these things and hope they're going to come or hope they're going to pay for it, but we have to have customers and other stakeholders engaged on that roadmap as we're making these investments as we move forward. And then the last thing is, gets back to embracing technology partners. How do we make sure utilities are incented to invest in the future, invest in research and development, invest in large-scale pilots before moving forward on full-scale rollouts of programs? So essentially those are the key things I'd say we have to put forward.
Oh, thank you. Do any of your other gentlemen want to talk about your vision for utility of the future? Michael from Con Edison?
I'd love to. I think a lot of the way we see this is very similar. I think Rudy hit all the main points very well. A lot of things are changing here, but big piece of this stay the same, and that is that our customers as utility companies remain at the forefront. Our job is to provide safe, reliable, efficient, increasingly green energy to our customers, and we see that as a primary role and our main focus. How we facilitate that, how we bring in distributed resources, increasingly green distributed resources, and do that in an effective way is a big part of the challenge. And we see the grid, the systems that have served us well for decades, over 100 years, being a very important part of that. The grid is a major facilitator for distributed resources and bringing the value proposition for those distributed resources to our customers. So we think the regulatory challenge of figuring out how to appropriately reinforce that grid and keep that grid sustainable is one of the key aspects we're focusing on.
A lot of the same. We feel the grid is critical. PSEG Long Island is a little different because we're technically not a regulated investor-owned utility on Long Island. We're operating a 12-year contract on behalf of LIPA, But similarly, we feel we need to invest in the grid, and we need to be able to be rewarded for making those kind of investments that will allow for greater quantities of renewable resources and distributed generation to be out on the grid.
Okay, and Charlie from Central Hudson.
I agree with everything that's been said so far, but just to give it a little bit different twist, and certainly grid investment's important, but when I look at what's taking place on our system in particular, and we're probably about a tenth of the size of Con Ed, and there are more than 35 solar installations in our system reaching about 70 megawatts, and I think Con Ed said there were around 60 megawatts, and so 70 megawatts on a system about one-tenth the size certainly has an impact. And so when I look at it, I almost look at it as similar to the Uber model. And if you're familiar with Uber, particularly in New York, I think there's actually more Uber cabs than there are yellow cabs today. And under the Uber model, Uber is leveraging the capital investment made by others for their business and utilizing those vehicles that are owned by individuals, paying them for the value they bring to the business they've essentially established. And when I look at all of the solar installations on our system, those are investments by others, not by us, but they can bring value to the grid. And so it's, developing the right models to pay for the value those systems bring to the grid without needing to make investments on the system. While investments on our system are certainly important, but we want to be able to leverage the technology that's out there, whether it's solar technology or other DER technology. I'm particularly excited about the opportunity to couple some of that with battery storage that I think can bring more value. But I think we need to be thinking along those lines of understanding how all of this integrates. How do we begin to develop partnerships, not only with third-party providers, also with customers, to bring the greatest value to the grid?
A lot of people have, the misnomer that utilities don't want solar or don't like solar, but there's actually more utility-owned solar, I think, out there than anything. Does your utility need distributed energy resources?
I think when you look at the grid, there are absolutely needs on the grid. Some of them are for voltage support, and it's not necessarily across the grid, but in particular areas. So there are some areas where, when you look at an integrated distribution resource plan and consider generation in addition to investments on the system, there are locations where solar or other distributed resources can provide value. We look at demand response programs in lieu of T&D investments. So in particular spots, there is value. And so, I think ultimately, when you look at a long-term vision, it's about creating a marketplace that gives third parties the opportunity to have visibility into where that value is. And that value has, certainly different financial rewards based on where it is in the system. There are other places where the installation can actually be detrimental to the system and has to be restrained as well. So, again, it's considering where it's connected to the system and what it can do and when it can do it.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I
too,
just want to
Ruben?
add one thing, and I agree with everything you said. And your question started out and said, do we need it on the system? And absolutely, Charlie's right. There are certain spots where we could look and it could reinforce the grid. But the bottom line is, when you look at the applications, our customers want it, right?
And your customer-driven industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So our customers want it. So our role is to figure out what's the right way of integrating it into the existing infrastructure, put the right policies in place, et cetera, so it proliferates the right way. But if our customers want it, our role is to how to facilitate that and how to make that happen.
And on the downstate side of the house,
The one thing I would add, I agree with what the two gentlemen just said, but also the idea of facing the panels toward the west, we heard that earlier today, or better yet, putting in a single-axis tracker that would follow the sun from east to west, because really what the grid does need, at least speaking for Long Island, we need peak day capacity. On a hot summer afternoon at 5 in the afternoon, or in the case of the South Fork out in the Hamptons, it peaks at 6 or 7 p.m. And during that late afternoon or early evening time, we need capacity. So having the panels oriented more toward the west and adding battery storage gives us the capacity when we need it most. So as we heard, the customers want it, we want it, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the grid, but we can make it even better by having it oriented and located in the right location and potentially coupling with storage.
So I think I want to reiterate some of the same points. Our customers clearly want it, so that's one of the big engaging factors. But I think we also need it. So in our Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, that's a program that we've initiated to defer about $1.2 billion worth of capital investment in a major substation. And we're looking to defer that substation out 7 years. And we're looking for customer-sided solutions to help us do that. So in that case, we need it to help us defer major asset investment to help reduce costs for customers going forward. So we need the customer engagement. So both they're looking for it and we need it to help us operate our system in the most efficient way possible. And that means engaging customers, and it means engaging customers in solutions in different ways, because our peak for that area happens to be completely different than the solar peak. So solar may be part of the solution, but like we talked about in some of the morning sessions, it's got to be solar coupled with something else to really make it work for the grid.
And that type of project, I think, might be the other side of the argument of, well, how is solar helping all of your customers? But in the case where you're putting up distributed energy resources coupled with storage, that can help delay putting in the cost of a substation, that is a benefit to all the customers.
That would be a benefit to all the customers, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different dialogues about that going on. Let's move a little bit to REV, and I know that you're working on you're on a working group. So what are some of the goals that you're hoping to achieve through perhaps Central Hudson solar utility demonstration projects?
Yeah, actually, PSEG Long Island in my case.
I'm sorry.
You said Central. I did work at Central Hudson. She
Sorry
must be
about that.
she's clairvoyant because I worked for Central Hudson for almost 30 years
knew that.
before coming to Long Island. We have 3 demonstration projects that we're contemplating. These aren't approved yet, but we're looking at them. And there are 3 different areas within the solar space. One of them is we want on-bill financing. The New York Sun program is going to run out of money on Long Island before it runs out anywhere else, because we've been the fastest growing and the fastest adoption rate. We now have 15,000 residential solar customers.
That megawatt block program, you can go
Yeah, the
online and
megawatt block.
see where you guys are at.
Right, we're now in the last block. We're in the last block. It's 20 cents a watt. I think the rest of the state is probably close to $1 a watt. We're at 20 cents a watt. Our forecast right now is that by this time next year, that 20 cents will be 0. So we want something to encourage and allow customers to continue to avail themselves of solar. So we want to have a financing program. So we're looking at on-bill financing, and we're currently doing the computer programming to allow our billing system to accommodate multiple banks, so we could bring in different financing institutions besides NYSERDA's Green Jobs, Green New York. So that's one demonstration.
No, are you in conversations? Is it a different conversation that you're having with financing institutions today that might not have wanted to finance solar projects, say, 5 years ago? Is it an easier conversation?
Absolutely.
Because of what, transparency of data?
Yeah, the transparency of data, the cost of the systems that have come down, and just the proven, as we heard earlier today, the last 5 years, so many solar systems have gone in around the country that banks are now comfortable financing something because they know it works.
Yeah, they used to say, well, will it last 20 years?
Right. I think they're now confident that it will. So that would be one. And then the 2 other ones I'll just quickly touch upon is we have one substation that's actually above its limit, the hosting capacity. It's above its limit, and we'd like to be able to accommodate more solar there. So we're looking at a software integration with smart inverters and software at the substation that would allow a communication between our substation and the large ground-mounted utility arrays to be able to increase hosting capacity. And then the final one we have is the west-facing that I mentioned. We want to go out with a large RFP for renewable resources on Long Island. And it would not only solar, it could be offshore wind and other resources. What we want to do is, rather than have a 20-year power purchase agreement at a fixed price, which is what LIPA had done the last 2 times, we want to have a price premium between the hours of, say, 2 and 6 p.m. on a summer afternoon when we need it most. And by allowing the bidders to bid a premium during those hours, we may encourage them to put in the tracking system to capture more energy during the hours when it's most valuable.
Do you have, Rudy, a similar demonstration projects that you are hoping can help achieve both your goals and the goals of REV?
Yeah, we're looking at, well, our distribution territory in New York is in upstate New York, our electric distribution territory. So we're looking at 3 different pilots in 3 different regions. And while we'll be using technology, the goals of the pilots are really to test business models, quite frankly, and revenue streams. So the first region is going to look at really 2 things. It's going to look at utility-owned solar in a low-income area, and also in that same region is an aggregated group of commercial customers where we will set up almost a mini sort of distribution platform provider where we'll manage all the resources, battery, solar, et cetera, demand response in that aggregated commercial setting. That's region 1. Region 2 is a little different. It's sort of a landlord-tenant type of structure. There we're going to test some resiliency for an area, and then individual resiliency in the home, you know, a solar and battery and things like that. Again, it's not testing the technology. It's there to test price points and test business models and revenue streams. And then the third one is in another region, and that is more of a, I'll call it a bundled approach, where we're going to be bundling a number of offerings to customers, solar amongst other things, as a package. And we're going to be testing what bundles resonate with consumers and what they're willing to pay as well for all those things.
So I imagine, for example, in the community shared project, then you also do have to work with billing and having a new, you know, on-billing model as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
we're going to
that's been a barrier for a while.
It
so
has
that'll
been, and we're going to be, in all of those, working with a number of technology partners, as I talked about before, to enact all of that as
And
well.
I think on our pitch session later, there's some demonstrations of some models of pitches, so stick around for that. And Charlie, from Central Hudson, you have, I know, some interesting demonstration projects.
We do,
Potentials,
really three that I'll focus on really quick. We have a community solar project that we're proposing. What we're trying to demonstrate here is the opportunity to provide solar to customers that don't have the opportunity to install it on their property, whether it's they don't own the facility, it's maybe the orientation of the building, or they may not have the financial wherewithal to install solar themselves. But these customers do pay into the RPS, and they should have the same opportunity to access solar energy specifically for them. So our proposal is to sell blocks of energy to those customers, 100 kilowatt hour blocks of energy, which they can subscribe for. The concept is that they can buy it at a fixed price. They can maintain that fixed price for 25 years with a minimum of 2 years. The idea is to price it at current day market, so it provides the customer a hedge if they choose to buy in. Gives them the opportunity not to pay RPS or SBC charges on that block of energy in which they're buying. We hope to be able to also demonstrate that through building a community solar facility at a larger scale, you take advantage of the economies of scale opposed to individual rooftops. And if you applied a similar subsidy for customer-sited tier solar to a facility of this nature, your carbon reduction is achieved at about half the cost for a larger facility. So we think that reaches to the state's goals and gives customers an opportunity to participate. And there's also a low-income element of the program that is carved out specifically for low-income customers, get low-income customers engaged, that actually gives them an even better price than the market price. And the concept behind it is all of this is intended to be accomplished without utilizing net metering, and demonstrate that it still can be done cost effectively without net metering. Another project we're working on that we hope to couple with this as well as with other customers is behind the meter services and creating a marketplace for customers where customers can go and see what opportunities are available for them, whether it be participating in a community solar project, taking advantage of an energy efficiency program, taking advantage of a demand response program, taking advantage of reaching out to a solar provider to have solar installed, but giving the customers a single portal, a single marketplace that they can go to. And also among the customers, create a community where customers can communicate among each other, share experiences, and learn from each other. And then the third project, which is, I want to say, a project that won't be filed as a demonstration project just based on where it is at this time, is a project for creating a microgrid and working with a third party and a large number of customers in a particular area of our service territory. We think there's great opportunity for multiple distributed energy resources to build this microgrid, but we're really just in the early stages on that project.
You know, it's interesting because there's been a dialogue around the country about the perception that solar is for the wealthy and it's not fair for the lower income. But every one of you mentioned a project that was for the community or for the lower income or for, you know, particularly constrained area. I mean, no wonder everybody's watching what's going on in New York. So you're getting proactively ahead of that discussion. And I'm wondering, do you think that you would have been doing these demonstration projects with or without REV, or did REV just push it along a little faster?
One of the positions we took with our community solar project was that no one else was coming to the market with the product. And it's not that we necessarily want to own solar, but we wanted to stimulate third parties to come forward and build projects like this. So, you know, while we've gotten pushback on a utility ownership model, that wasn't our intent, but we've essentially made the argument that others should come and do this. And so, you know, I think part of our responsibility is to try to put together these business models that others may be able to replicate. And some will argue that maybe we have some advantages others don't have, but the idea is still at least get the model out there. I'm sure the model won't be perfect. There are probably opportunities to tweak it. But if we can partner with the right third parties to create other streams of revenue, we think it can work.
Anybody else want to take that getting ahead and something for everybody in the community point of the question? No? Okay. That's okay. So now you're on the inside of what's happening with REV in the working group. So what's the current timeline, and what are you expecting to happen next? Or are there any surprises for the utility companies going to be coming out?
I wouldn't say there are any surprises. It's going to be a long-term process. I'm on a working group. We have a report due on June 30th, which is not far away. That's going to then be sent out for public comment, and I don't remember the exact schedule, but I think around August or so we'll be getting public comments, and that's on track 1. And then there's a whole track 2 of the REV proceeding, which in many ways is really going to be the more important of the two, because until you can get the price signals and the rate design and the incentive structures in place, the markets really won't, you know, ultimately the markets need the price signals and things to work. So it's a long-term process. It's going to be going on all the rest of 2015 and I'm sure well into 2016. The demonstration projects are an important component. Each of the utilities will be filing those on July 1st. And I think by demonstrating different business models, you can really get more experience than just, a lot of it is theoretical right now, to be honest with you. A lot of the REV discussions we're having are theoretical market structures, market designs. But until you get the incentives in place and the actual working projects, it's going to take a little while to all play out.
So there'll be some transparency there when you file these projects with PSC. The public will be able to take a look at them, and there'll obviously be some time delay before you're actually breaking ground, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I think there is. I think some of them are physical infrastructure where there's actually working around. Some of them are engagement with customers to test some of these market principles. So 2 of our initiatives are engaging the residential customer and the small commercial, trying to provide them more information and testing some of how the market interaction would work, because how the engagement is going to work in this exercise so far has been a fairly theoretical discussion on how the marketplace will function, what the engagement will be, what the price points need to be to get the level of engagement that we think we need. To make these things sustainable and work. And some of these REV demonstrations will be opportunities to test those market principles. And
I imagine you'll all learn from one another, you know, that of what works in what territory, and the needs are different, obviously, in different territories. So Rudy, are your utility now planning for the integration of a deeper penetration of solar within transmission and capacity? Is it now in your longer-term plans?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and we've seen in New England, the New England ISO take a very proactive approach around forecasting solar and embedding it into some of their forecasts. And New York ISO doing something very similar. They've embedded into their longer-term forecast for capacity and energy, and it inputs into transmission planning. And I think we heard earlier some additional studies are going to be doing all along that path of getting us a finer view of where the solar market's going and how to integrate it into the overall grid planning. Because solar is going to play a key role in distribution and even on the transmission part of the grids in the future. So I think it's critical that we plan for it. It's critical that we forecast it better and get a cleaner sort of line of sight to what we're going to expect and where we're going to expect it, so we can integrate it into the grid. I think that's going to be really the next frontier, is integrating it into the overall operation of the distribution systems and of the transmission systems. So to answer your question, absolutely, we're looking at that over the long term as well.
And Central Hudson?
We've actually already begun work on better integrating distributed resources, and we feel it's absolutely necessary to get greater visibility on the impact of these resources on our distribution system. And today, when systems are connected, we don't have any visibility to when they're generating, when they're not generating, what voltage are they pushing the system to. So we're building out a network communications infrastructure, and then we'll be installing a distribution management system, and placing sensors on the system so we can actually see the impact. Hopefully have the opportunity to get information from inverters tied to solar installations. So we have a real understanding of exactly what's happening to the system, which will allow us to do a distribution integrated resource plan when we're doing work on the distribution system for long-term planning. It obviously brings a lot of automation to the distribution system so it can be operated in a more efficient manner, but it needs to be done in conjunction with considering all of those resources. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. We think some of the things that we're doing can provide immediate value to customers just through volt-var optimization. But I really think when I look at distribution systems and distribution management systems, which we've been looking at very recently, they're significantly more complex than some of the transmission EMS systems. And when you consider the number of disturbances on a distribution system on a day-to-day basis, it's really going to take, I think, the distribution system into really the modern-day era versus where we are today.
And I know that Con Edison has even more challenges and more requirements and regulations, and I imagine in your planning, there's also another parallel track or not when you add storage into the solar. That's another big difference.
It is. So integrating storage with solar is actually, we're looking at one of our demonstration projects and being able to increase the value of solar to the grid and how you integrate that. So, but the planning process and how we've changed our planning process to integrate distributed resources has been front and center, to the point that my job didn't exist a year ago and now does, to essentially integrate distributed resource in the planning process for us. So we have really shifted our focus to integrating those distributed resources in our long-term planning process. And we think there's a number of facilitating technologies that need to go along with that, AMI being one of them, to give us the granular view of usage and what is going on in the system, so you can more efficiently model your system and more efficiently operate your system.
You might have to hold your mic up a little bit more. There's some construction going on over here. And yes, I'll take the time again to point out that you stole our New York City Solar Coordinator to come over to work with you guys, so I know that you have a Allison Kling. So I know that I guess all the utilities now have a growing distributed energy department before, but I don't want to pass you by on the question about planning and integration.
Sure, yeah, we're definitely planning for the greater quantities of solar and renewables on the grid, both transmission and distribution. And on the South Fork, similar to Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, which was about $1.2 billion, I think you said, we have a $300 million transmission investment that'll be needed by 2018 for the South Fork of Long Island. The South Fork of Long Island, which includes the Hamptons and Montauk, is growing by 3 to 4% per year. So we need the capacity. So we went out with RFP, encouraging solar, and we got 21 megawatts of solar in an area that only serves 250 megawatts. So it's approaching 10% of the capacity, whereas system-wide we're about 2% solar. In that particular area, in a few years we'll be at 10% solar. So we have to have certain things that we do to the substations to accommodate that greater amount. And we also proposed a 5-megawatt battery storage project in that location, partly to accommodate additional solar and partly to shift the load so that we can actually accommodate the peak needs at that time. So definitely planning, and as you said on your last comment, more and more departments, my whole department is focused on efficiency and renewables, and a big part of that is integrating the various distributed resources.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys all here. I mean, you didn't think 9 years ago we'd be able to have this conversation. So a question from the audience about, it says shut-offs during heating season. You know, I guess it means, you know, brownouts and cutbacks and so forth. And I do recall one of your projects in particular needed to focus on not just the summer, but there's like 17 hours or something like that where you really hit peak at certain times. And so that goes back again to one of your demonstration projects and how REV can help with preventing future brownouts or whatever, and how these projects can help.
So I think the REV demonstration projects are looking, at least the projects we're looking at so far, testing customer engagement for those peak periods and how can we essentially value those peak hours in such a way that incentivizes people either bring resources to the grid, if they had them, distributed resources, or to take resources off, take load off at those peak times and be incentivized to do that, to manage their demand in such a way that they would limit those peak hours and limit the investment required to have the system available to meet those very limited number of peak hours, 20, 25 hours a year that you may hit a system peak. And if you can build the proper incentive systems into your structure, you may be able to incentivize people to switch their patterns of usage so those go away.
Now, are there different challenges regarding peak usage or shutdowns on any of your networks, or is it a different kind of challenge that you might have of a certain line?
You know, today I would say across our system we really don't have any limitations. I mean, our peak has declined over the years, so there is capacity, but there's obviously a lot of infrastructure needs. You know, occasionally there are pocket areas that have voltage needs, but you know, certainly our summer is our peaking period. During the winter period, there are no issues in regard to not being able to serve customers. Sometimes there's limitations associated with the gas system and getting enough gas into the system to serve customers, but generally not on the electric system.
New York, we don't have really that issue. We have a couple of pockets in New England and eastern Massachusetts where we have some pockets, but there, again, we work with energy efficiency, work with our demand response partners to really drive down demand during those peak times, and we've been successful in doing that.
So that kind of makes sense that many of your demonstration projects are centered around what customers want to do, and they might be different than what your demonstration projects are, and you seem to have a mix of both in the types of demonstration projects. So this will be very interesting to see the plans for all these different demonstration projects. What comes next after that? What will you be required to do next after the plans? And this is a question set here. You know, information sharing, operation in emergencies, what you can share. What comes next after the demonstration projects are underway?
One of the areas, the AMI metering that we talked about earlier, we need to get more granular data if we're going to be asking customers to change their behaviors and reduce peaks and improve system load factor. We need the data, and the customers need the data to be able to determine what the right times are and how effective it may be if they can reduce load. So we've proposed AMI meters, at least in certain, not island-wide, but in certain customers and in certain areas. We believe AMI metering is a big part of it, allowing that data to be shared with other market participants to be able to see if they can help.
Or for like the New York State Solar Map?
Similar,
Perhaps?
yeah, something along those lines. So AMI metering is a part of it, but I'm sure there's a lot of other beyond that.
I think the value of having everyone do different pilots is that you don't have a Con Ed 3 pilots and a Central Hudson 3 pilots and a National Grid 3 pilots and PSEG, but you really have 12 pilots across the whole state. So the idea is how do you learn, and then how do you translate that learning into rapid action? What worked? How could you deploy it in your territories and take it to the next level? So to me, the next phase of it is taking those learnings and doing deeper penetration.
I really see this as a constant evolution. There's going to be continual change. All of these projects are going to give us great learning opportunities. But I think that you know, through the REV process, a lot is being looked at. You know, rate structures are being evaluated, trying to understand, you know, what are the proper rate structures for the varied type of customers we have. Sometimes we try to force things into an existing rate structure, which doesn't necessarily work well for the customer or work well for the utility. I think some of the things that we're doing right now are going to take time to build out. It's going to take time to build out a distribution management system. So in that process, I think we're going to see a lot that will change. What I hope really happens is that when you begin to see significant change in the industry, it's just going to bring more and more technology, more opportunities to the market, more focus on the distribution system, more focus on things that can help and serve customers better. When you think about utilities and the way they've operated for years and years, a lot of the equipment manufacturers, haven't made, really a lot of, I want to say, advanced technology equipment to reach the new needs. Much of the equipment we buy today has the ability to communicate, and we're hoping we're seeing a lot more of those types of systems that come to the marketplace, things like that are even more reasonable as technology continues to advance. So, I see it really as an evolution, and I think what's before us, much of which may be unknown, but I think the opportunities can be endless. It's just, really limited by, I think, all of our imaginations at this point.
It's interesting because about RED, everything is very transparent, that it's out there, and the demonstrations will be very transparent. We're hopeful with the launch of the New York State Solar Map in September, there'll be a place for this information to live. And so we're looking for, we're designing it as a flexible tool to add in the more layers, to add in resiliency components to the New York State calculator, which will include values, other value streams. And then there's opportunities for, the New York City Grid Ready project to be able to put on there. We're working on a New York State Grid Ready project. So, a lot of times it comes down to location about that. So it's a little bit of a different role for utilities to play when they, of course, have to protect their customers' security, but at the same time being transparent. We're hoping we'll see some of these projects on the New York State Solar Map. I don't know if you saw the demonstration earlier. Any thoughts on 3.0 version of it, or things that we could add that would be helpful? No?
No, nothing comes to mind immediately.
I think any tool we can put out there to help customers better understand what their options are is going to help. Information in this space is generally going to help facilitate better customer decisions and more educated customer decisions on what their options are. And then if we build the right kind of marketplace and value the different components of those and how the different components bring value back to the grid. So if it's solar, but solar coupled with battery array, and that has some ability to offset distribution or transmission investment, and that brings a certain value, and we can figure out the right way to value those things and make it easier for the customer to decide they want to participate in that space, then I think we've improved the process.
A lot about more choices.
I think it's early to say what 3.0 will look like, because I think we're all embarking on this journey, right? And we've all committed that we want the state and we want our organizations and our customers and our partners to be more innovative. Once you make that commitment, you're going to start asking very different questions. And I think we're all going to be asking ourselves very different questions. And at your Solar Summit 10 and 11, you're going to be asking very different questions that are going to open up new opportunities that I don't think we fully see today.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we face to really kind of unleash the opportunities is the engagement of customers. And, I was pretty excited to see the New York Solar Map, only disappointed to find out it's not available till September. But
we're working on it.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Looks pretty good. And I'm sure that will continue to evolve. But think of in the challenge associated with customer engagement. Nest came out with the thermostat, and the whole concept behind the thermostat is that you won't be engaged as a customer, and you don't need to be engaged as a customer, because this thermostat is going to learn about you, and the thermostat then is going to make decisions based on choices that you made. And I have a Nest thermostat, and I have to admit, I never thought anybody would look at the thermostat on their iPhone, but it's kind of neat, so I do, I guess. It gives me information I didn't have, the humidity, although I think my dog running around the house messes it up. So in the customer engagement piece is the challenge, because do customers really want to take the time to manage their energy in a fashion that takes time and effort, or do they want to be able to kind of set it and forget it and it manage to the parameters in which they set? And maybe those parameters are both comfort parameters as well as price parameters. So once you're set up, you're ready to go. Or does that become a service? Is it a service where a third party is actually managing it for the customer? You know, you see a lot of home automation services being offered today that can be done by the customer, but is also offered as a service where the customer doesn't need to worry about it. So getting customer engagement as part of the whole REV process, I think, is going to be an important element. And at this point in time, I have to admit, in much of the discussions we've had regarding customer engagement, there's a lot of speculation as to what it will be. There's not a lot of information or data that you know, we can point to say this is how customers will behave, this is how customers will act. And, you know, and that's a big part of, you know, having the success of REV.
No, I think it's interesting because you kind of put your finger right on it, that it was a tool you could use to play with your thermostat and an app on your phone or your computer. So there was something that you could do and see. So my experience in having done, you know, helping TRIA with the Solar Summit for the last 9 years is I can talk to reporters and bloggers, and they don't want to come watch talking heads. They don't want to write about soft costs. It's not tangible. It's not a technology. It's not a job. It kind of breezes over it. When we launched the New York City Solar Map, New York Times came to our office, CNN Money came to our office, Wall Street Journal came to our office because they could go in, put in their address, and see how much solar on their roof, and they were like, wow. And they all wrote about it, and that gives the customer something to do. So I'm hoping, and with everybody's help, adding in more information to the New York State Solar Map, that will be a good way to engage the customers because they can do something with it, a tool. So it gives them.
I think similar to that I mentioned earlier about AMI metering, but not only is it good for the utility so we can more effectively and efficiently read meters and get outage information and all those other things, but the customers themselves. We give the data to the customers so they can say, oh, I didn't know last Saturday afternoon, you know, what happened. Oh, maybe my kids were home, or, you know, some of it's maybe just playing with it. As Charlie said, you play with your thermostat, maybe you do that with your AMI data, but some of it's meaningful, and they can say, okay, if I was on a different rate design and I can save money, this is good for me. You know, residential and then all the way up to the largest manufacturers where they have a demand charge, and the demand charge is a big part of the bill. By giving them that hourly and 15-minute interval data and having them be able to graph it and set limits, the actual data is beneficial for customers and helps them save.
Well, the Twitter feed likes everybody talking about customer engagement, and there's going to be a lot more talking about that at the 3:15 panel. There's a question that is a little bit above my brain grade that asks about frequency regulation at distribution levels. They don't know either. That's the question. What about frequency regulation at distribution level? I guess that sounds like more technology.
Yeah. I mean, there is equipment today that can be on the distribution system that can give you waveform information and things of that nature. And that again, is getting to a distribution management system where you have a good sense of what's going on. But, you know, I think much of what we see today with distributed solar, we're not seeing those types of impacts where it's become problematic. But you get into larger systems, you may see some of those problems. The inverters, and the solar providers can speak to this better than I can, are pretty sophisticated and tend to perform quite well. So I'm not sure, you know, certainly there's going to be parameters in which equipment's going to need to meet in order to not have an impact on the system or your neighbor for that matter. But I'm not quite sure at this point in time how big of a problem that will be.
I've got just 5 minutes left.
I think the better person to ask that was Tom Key, who was here from EPRI earlier,
Okay,
unless he asked the question.
Tom Key's right there in the third row there, raised his hand.
Unless he sent the question in which case that's a loaded question.
No, somebody else. So you can see Tom Key to answer that question right there. We have all the experts we need somewhere right here in this room. 5 minutes left. Final thoughts, guys, on REV and your utility. We'll start with Rudy here.
Final thoughts, I'll only add something to probably what I didn't say before. We talked a lot about customer engagement. The thing that we are kind of remind ourselves is they aren't just our customers, they're someone else's customer as well, right? We talked about Uber before and others, and I think the big point is their expectations for service, their expectations for simplicity, their expectation for choices are all being set by others. So we've got to really make sure we're giving them the same experience when they're making energy choices, when they want to go to solar or anything else, than they have with every other service provider that they interact with.
Charlie?
I think Rudy makes an excellent point. I mean, what's most important to us as a utility is to ensure we're meeting the needs of our customers and working with our customers and understanding those needs. So as we move through REV, we can help shape REV to meet those needs. Absent getting that information and absent being able to speak for our customers, I get concerned that decisions we made on perceptions and beliefs that may not be accurate or may not be the same for all of our customers. So I think it's really important to get a good sense of what our customers want, working with our customers, and reaching to our customer needs. I think that's absolutely critical.
On the same theme with customers, PSEG Long Island has a 12-year contract to operate the electric system on Long Island. We have an 8-year option to extend, which we certainly hope to do, which will be serving customers on Long Island for at least the next 20 years or maybe longer. But we have a scorecard that we're tracked, and we have to report to LIPA every month.
Report card.
Yeah, report card. And one of the number one, we have weightings on our scores. The number one weighted issue is customer satisfaction, as measured by J.D. Power. And as you can imagine, after Hurricane Sandy and LIPA and everything in the news, LIPA is not exactly the most well-liked utility company, and PSEG Long Island is doing everything we can to turn that around. So meeting customers' needs, if customers want solar or they want renewable, we certainly want to help them with that, and we've got to do it reliably and effectively and do it profitably, but most important is provide great customer service.
Theme going here.
So from my view, distributed resources, solar and other distributed resources are here to stay. And the New York State REV initiative is just an opportunity for us to look at our total business construct in a way to help facilitate that change, make sure that the grid that is extremely valuable, extracting all of the value to different constituents of those distributed resources is there, is healthy, is sustained, and is available and reinforced in a way that really unlocks all of the potential of the distributed resources, including solar.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know that you've got a plane to catch. We have a set change. We'll take a quick picture.